Coming up on The World Today. Youths in Nigeria continue protesting against police brutality as the Presidential Panel on Police Reforms approved their 5-point demand. U.S. Supreme Court nominee Amy Barrett sidesteps question on landmark abortion ruling. Plus, U.S. President Donald Trump returns to the campaign trail less than 2 weeks after testing positive for COVID-19. Hello and welcome to the program. I'm Teniola Shobowale. We begin here in Nigeria, where it's been another day of protest against the operations of the Special Anti-Robbery Squad, as protesters continue to spread across the country, insisting on a total reform of the Nigeria police force.
Protests against the operations of the Special Anti-Robbery Squad, or SARS as the unit is popularly called, continues to spread across the country as Nigerians insist on total reform of the police force. The continuing protests and the rate at which they are spreading is an obvious sign that the people are not satisfied with the president's overtures aimed at bringing the protests to an end. Following Monday's total lockdown of the city, youths in Lagos State troop out yet again in different areas to resume their protests. Again, many converge at the seat of government in Alausa, Ikeja, bearing placards, singing and dancing. They are later addressed by Governor Babajide Sanwo-Olu, who announces a 200 million naira fund for victims of police brutality in the state.
Your number one request for us was for me to release all the protestants. So all the protestants have been released. Yes. Without any condition. I have instructed my Ministry of Youth who have set up, and one of the things that I said to some of your leaders yesterday, I want the list of everybody that has had one fatal encounter with SARS or not. I want all their names in Lagos. Yes. If there's any fatal encounter with SARS in Lagos, so I want all their names. I have some names. I want to be sure that I have all the names. I have set up a 200 million naira fund in which I will appoint some of your leaders. I will appoint some of your leaders. No leader. No leader. You don't want money? No leader. No leader. Okay. No leader.
And staying in Lagos, it's a change of venue for protesters who had previously occupied the Lekki toll gate area as they move to Unikon in Lagos Island, where they present their petition to the police command. And the action continues in Oyo State as protesters gather in Agodi, just outside the governor's office complex in Ibadan, the state capital. Today, they are joined by the State Deputy Governor, Rauf Olainiyan, who was seen carrying a placard in solidarity with the protesters, indicating that he too was once a victim of police brutality. And in Akure, the Ondo State capital, the call is the same as protesters march on the major streets, singing songs for an end to police brutality. And for the first time since the protests began, youths in Enugu State in the southeast joined their counterparts in other parts of the country, demanding an end to police brutality. And just like their counterparts in Lagos, they take their protests to the government house. And then to the State Police Command to register their complaints, with the police providing protection for them. And from the southeast, protesters gather at Freedom Square in Ori, the Imo State capital, as they join the march against police brutality. And in the South-South, Hundreds of protesters gather at the Popular Globe on Wellington Bassey Way, Akwa Ibom State, where they insist that the state governor, Udom Emmanuel, should address them. Meanwhile, protesters in Port Harcourt, the River State capital, defy a ban on the End SARS march by Governor Nyesom Wike, daring to take their protest to the seat of power. Up north in Borno State, a coalition of interest groups is also out on the street. But this time, members are asking the federal government to reconsider the disbandment of SARS. According to them, while they appreciate the positions of other people in other parts of the country, the peculiar security situation in the northeast, especially regarding the fight against terror, requires that the special police unit be retained and made more effective. The protest walk terminates at the government house, where they were received by the deputy governor.
Our people have now said their view. We're going to relay that message to the president.
There's no telling when these protests will end, but judging by the way protesters across the country are adding to their demands daily, zeroing in on police brutality, it may not be anytime soon.
Well, it seems the protests are paying off after all, as the Presidential Panel on Police Reforms has approved the 5-point demand of all those calling for an end to police brutality in the country. This followed a meeting convened by the Inspector General of Police, Mohammed Adamu. The demands include halting use of force against protesters and unconditional release of arrested citizens. Others are justice for all deceased victims and compensation for their families, psychological evaluation and retaining for all disbanded SARS officers before redeployment, and increase in salaries. The panel also resolved to design a roadmap and work plan for the implementation of the white paper of the Presidential Panel on the Reform of SARS. National Human Rights Commission is to set up an independent panel to look into human rights violations by SARS and other segments of the Nigerian police. Moving on now, over in the United States, it's day 2 of President Donald Trump's Supreme Court nominee Senate confirmation hearing. Today, Amy Coney Barrett told the Senate that her religious views would not affect her decisions on the bench, but evaded questions on some issues such as abortion. She says she has no agenda and vows to stick to the rule of law. If Judge Barrett passes the committee hearing, the full U.S. Senate will vote to confirm or reject her for a lifelong place on the top U.S. court.
Yes, you always know. Judges can't just wake up one day and say, I have an agenda, I like guns, I hate guns, I like abortion, I hate abortion, and walk in like a royal queen and impose, their will on the world. You have to wait for cases and controversies, which is the language of the Constitution, to wind their way through the process.
The VOA's congressional correspondent, Catherine Gibson, joins us now for more on this. Catherine, it's day 2. Give us a feel of today's proceedings so far.
That's right. Well, day 2 of these Supreme Court confirmation hearings feel very different than the first day, Monday. And that's mostly because we're hearing more from Judge Barrett herself. She only got an opportunity for a very brief opening statement on Monday, but now we've really moved into the meat of this hearing, where senators are given 30-minute blocks of time each to ask the judge questions about her legal philosophy, questions about individual rulings that she's made throughout her career. And so she's really digging down into the details of how she approaches making judicial decisions, as well as answering some questions about whether or not she would rule on issues relating to President Donald Trump. One of the key questions that came up today that really hasn't been touched on before is the fact that Justice Barrett has not been in discussion with President Trump about any of these big ticket legal issues that are coming up before the U.S. Supreme Court soon, namely the landmark healthcare case that could be overturned, and of course, any election-related disputes that may come up to the court after the November 3rd presidential election. She said she hadn't had any discussions with President Trump about those cases.
You know, Catherine, like you mentioned, she did speak quite briefly yesterday. I mean, day one, mostly until the judge explaining her legal philosophy and qualifications for the positions. But Republicans wanting the confirmation ahead of the presidential election in 3 weeks has made it more so highly controversial. As we learn more about Judge Barrett, how are Americans warming up to her so far?
Well, I think it really speaks to the partisan divides in this country that no one here really expects these confirmation hearings to change any minds. Senate Judiciary Chairman Lindsey Graham even mentioned that on Monday himself. He said, you know, we're going to go through this process. She is going to get all Democratic votes no and all Republican votes yes. Nothing is changing here. And I think that's really reflected out in the country. But you have to remember that U.S. Supreme Court nominees are also a very important motivating factor for voters. And so while they won't have their minds changed, they will be watching these confirmation hearings very closely. And it may motivate more people to go out to the polls, either to vote for President Donald Trump or to vote for the Democratic presidential nominee, Joe Biden.
So 3 weeks to go till the elections, and you know, there's going to be more battles coming up in regards to this. So this is to last for 2 more days. What more can we expect in the coming days?
Right. So we're on the second day of the hearings. We expect 2 more days this week of this kind of back and forth between senators and Judge Barrett. Then next week, the committee will basically prepare her nomination and pass it to the full Senate floor, where we expect that vote could be as early as October 26th. That week, somewhere in there, is when Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell will schedule that full floor vote that will make Judge Barrett into Justice Barrett on the U.S. Supreme Court. And of course, that's just 1 week before Election Day here in the United States.
All right, then, Catherine, a lot to look forward to. Thank you so much for joining us on The World Today.
You're so welcome.
Still speaking of the U.S. presidential election, President Donald Trump has returned to the campaign trail less than 2 weeks after testing positive for COVID-19. He told thousands of supporters, many of whom were not wearing masks, that he could give them, in his words, a big fat kiss at a rally in the battleground state of Florida. While speaking in Ohio, his rival Joe Biden accused the president of reckless behavior. The 2 presidential candidates are scrambling to secure votes with 3 weeks until the November the 3rd election.
I went through it. Now they say I'm immune. I feel so powerful. I'll walk into that audience. I'll walk in there. I'll kiss everyone in that audience. I'll kiss the guys and the beautiful women and everybody. I'll just give you a big fat kiss. No, but there is something nice. I don't have to be locked up in my basement, and I wouldn't allow that to happen anyway. I wouldn't allow it to happen. When you're the president, you can't lock yourself in a basement and say, I'm not going to bother with the world. You got to get out, and it's risky. It's risky, but you got to get out.
The World Health Organization has warned that it is both unethical and unscientific to let the coronavirus run free in the hope of achieving the so-called herd immunity. While speaking at a press briefing, WHO Director General Tedros Ghebreyesus cautioned that herd immunity is a concept used for vaccination in which a population can be protected from a certain virus if a threshold of vaccination is reached.
Herd immunity is achieved by protecting people from a virus, not by exposing them to it. Never in the history of public health has herd immunity been used as a strategy for responding to an outbreak, let alone a pandemic. It's scientifically and ethically problematic. Letting the virus circulate unchecked, therefore, means allowing unnecessary infections, suffering, and death. We're only beginning to understand the long-term health impacts among people with COVID-19. Allowing a dangerous virus that we don't fully understand to run free is simply unethical. It's not an option.
We'll have more on the COVID-19 pandemic, plus ancient statues emerge from the shadows at an art display in Rome. That's after the break. Please stay with us. Thanks for staying with us. Still on the COVID-19 pandemic, London's Mayor Sadiq Khan says the city is within a few days of being escalated to a new and stricter level of coronavirus measures. Here's more on this and other developments on our COVID-19 Global Update.
Mayor of London, Sadiq Khan, says it is inevitable that the city will move into Tier 2 of the government's new COVID curbing system, warning that a trigger point will soon be reached.
Well, I've always promised Londoners that I'll be upfront and frank with them and honest, and I'm afraid the bad news is that all the indicators we have, the number of new cases, the positivity rate, admissions to hospitals, admissions in ICUs, cases of older people, all the indicators we have are that things are going in the wrong direction.
The system announced by the Prime Minister yesterday evening will see areas put into different categories labelled as medium, high or very high risk, depending on their rates of infection. In Spain, Catalan primary care health workers take to the streets of Barcelona on the first day of a 4-day strike to demand better conditions and more resources to face the COVID pandemic. Holding up banners and chanting "enough," health workers demonstrate in front of the Catalan healthcare headquarters.
We're asking for help because we cannot give the people the resources they need to be treated during this pandemic. I mean, we're not treating people as we should in the current circumstances we're facing.
Spain has reported nearly 28,000 new coronavirus cases since Friday, October the 9th, bringing the cumulative total to 888,968. Meanwhile, Russia on Tuesday reported record-high daily coronavirus cases and deaths, pushing total infections to over 1.3 million cases. However, authorities say they do not plan to impose lockdowns across the country. Moscow, the capital, has been the hardest hit by COVID-19. The city of nearly 13 million people, which recorded 4,618 new cases on Tuesday, has opened 2 temporary hospitals and ordered businesses to have at least 30% of staff working remotely. In Myanmar, a family of 10, including a 100-year-old woman, defied the odds to recover from the COVID-19 virus. To date, more than 1 million people worldwide have died from the coronavirus, with elderly people particularly at risk. But the disease was no match for centenarian Tin Kin and her family, who are now safe and back at their homes in Insen Township.
I was told that I was infected with that virus, but I said I felt nothing. I was eating well, showering myself and walking as normal.
Myanmar has recorded 29,314 positive cases of the virus, including 664 deaths to date.
To other stories now. Cyprus is suspending a scheme that grants citizenship and guarantees visa-free travel throughout the EU for those who invest a minimum of €2 million. It comes after Al Jazeera reporters filmed officials using the scheme to assist a fictional Chinese businessman with a criminal record. One of those filmed was Cyprus's parliamentary speaker, who said he would step down until an investigation was completed. The move comes into force next month. To the Brexit tussle now, Ireland's foreign minister says a deal between the European Union and Britain on their future relationship is still possible before the end of this year, but time is running out. Simon Coveney was speaking after a meeting ahead of a summit of EU leaders on Thursday and Friday to assess progress in the negotiations.
It's fair to say that there is progress being made on the protocol and many of the genuine concerns that both sides have in terms of the complexity of full implementation of what's been agreed. So the Brexit journey continues for a little bit longer yet. All of us need to ensure that we do everything we possibly can to make sure that we make a deal possible in the next few weeks, because we are running out of time. And once we get to the end of this month, then I think we really are running out of time to ratify any deal that that may be struck, or certainly I hope can be struck.
And finally, on the programme, ancient statues in Italy have emerged from the shadow as shadows at a blockbuster display in Rome. The marbles belong to the aristocratic Tolonia family and represent a fraction of the 620 sculptures in their possession, believed to be the largest such private collection in the world.
Decades of being locked away in a Rome basement, some of the finest sculptures from antiquity have been pulled from the gloom and returned to public view. Busts of Roman emperors and an ancient Greek relief carved 2,500 years ago are just some of the 92 pieces put on display.
The Tolonia Museum was one of the most important museums in Rome for quite a long time, from 1875 through World War II, and then it disappeared in some way. This is an opportunity to see a number of works that are extremely important, that everybody knows from books, but nobody has seen. So I think that the reappearance of such a legendary collection will be a very important event.
Among the pieces on view is a fountain basin carved in ancient Greece that was believed to have stood in the garden of Julius Caesar when it was already considered an antiquity.
When I've seen them for the first time, it was a great emotion, because I knew most of those pieces from books, but I had never seen them. So I was extremely impressed in this.
Many of the works have undergone substantial restoration over the years, including a statue of a goat whose body dates to the 1st century, but whose head is believed to have been created by the famed 17th century Italian sculptor. The Tolonia marbles will remain on display in Rome until June 2021 and are then expected to be shown in at least one other European country and in the United States before returning to Italy and being housed in a permanent museum.
And this is where we end the programme today. Thank you so much for watching. I'm Teniola Shoboale. Bye for now.